And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and this is 10 cards you should be putting in your Commander decks, episode 56. We are starting out this week with Revelli Squad, 2 white, human rebel, 3/3. Whenever one or more creatures attack you, if Revelli Squad is untapped, you may untap all creatures you control. So this is a very unassuming card, doesn't look like much. I really like it. I've put it in a few decks, most recently the Masako the Humorless deck I made. I saw it as sort of a backup for your commander, right? Because obviously you don't worry about your creatures being untapped to block with them with Masako, but if your commander gets removed, it could be a huge blowout for you because then your opponents can swing and you can't block. Revelli Squad will save you there, and it will save you in any sort of deck where you are really attacking at all. You know, I think in any deck that's white where you are regularly attacking, you don't have to worry about holding up blockers if you have Revelli Squad in play. It can be really handy that way because whenever someone attacks you, all your creatures get untapped and you can block freely. Even if you're in a Voltron strategy, right? Let's pretend we're in a Ural deck or something, right? Sometimes in Voltron strategies, it can be a little tough because you only probably have one creature and you attack with it, and assuming it doesn't have vigilance, now you don't really have a lot of blockers. Your opponents can swing in and get you. You have to be attacking with your Voltron commander, obviously, because that's how you win. Revelli Squad can be a great assist there. It's sort of like pseudo vigilance for your commander. But I really think you could throw this in any deck. It's a human and a rebel, so obviously that Lin Civi rebel deck, you want to put it in, or any sort of human tribal deck, you can put it in as well, because most of those decks are going to be an aggro theme. You're going to be attacking a lot, and then you won't ever have to worry about leaving up blockers because Revelli Squad is going to make sure you have them. Coming in at number 2 this week, Revival Revenge. And this is a split card. It's also a relatively new card, but it's one that just doesn't see hardly any play at all, and I think it's pretty darn good. So the Revival side is 2 hybrid Orzhov mana sorcery. Return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And the Revenge side, 4 white and a black sorcery, double your life total. Target opponent loses half their life rounded up. So first of all, the Revenge side is just great. That's always going to be good, right? In any commander game, doubling your life total and having an opponent lose half their life is always going to be good. It's going to be great. And 6 mana is not bad for that, I think. Can be particularly good in a life gain strategy. But for me, the Revival side is what's going to be the real deciding factor here. There are 27 commanders in the format that are white and black and are 3 mana value or less. So that's 27 commanders, and there's some real popular ones in here that I can just throw this in my deck and it's just going to get my commander out of the graveyard, right? If I don't need to get my commander out of the graveyard, I can use the other side, but just having a 2 mana spell that you can just let your commander go to the graveyard and then quickly get it out of the graveyard again seems really convenient. And then again, also the Revenge side can be a huge bloat in a game too. So I think this card should go in a lot more decks. Coming in at number 3 is Rift Sweeper, 1 and a green, Elf Shaman, 2/2. When Rift Sweeper enters the battlefield, choose target face-up exiled card. Its owner shuffles it into their library. So again, this card doesn't seem like much, but it's a card that absolutely has to get mentioned because it's one of those cards that is so unique in what it's doing. I already talked about Pull from Eternity on several of my videos because I really like that card because it does a similar thing. Rift Sweeper is slightly different, can be better too because it's shuffling it into your library, and if you have the ability to search your library for stuff, that's an easier way to get it. You're just going to want to put this in your deck if you have a really important piece, a combo piece, something that's really important. A lot of times you have important pieces in your deck that you need that when they get exiled, you can put them back in your library. Or maybe you just have a card that gets exiled and you want to shuffle it in so you can use it again. Any of those scenarios, this also works. And again, just like Pull from Eternity, it also works on your opponents, so you can use it in that situation as well, right? This is any face-up exiled card. So like a Suspend card, for example, your opponent's playing their Joyra deck and they have an Ulamog in exile that's about to remove the last counter and come back into play and start smashing face. You can just play this and shuffle it into owner's library. Problem solved. So it also works there as well. Really unique, interesting card. Coming in at number 4, Righteous Fury, 4 white sorcery. Destroy all tapped creatures. You gain 2 life for each creature destroyed this way. So I know I just did my mono white staples list and I talked about all all of the fantastic mono white board wipes there are already. So how would you ever find room for this one? You know, by comparison, it is probably a lot worse than a lot of those other ones, but I thought I would give it a mention because it is pretty unique. First of all, 6 mana is not bad. I know for a board wipe that's only going to destroy tapped creatures, that seems terrible, but think about it this way. You're on your turn, all your creatures just untapped, so you're not going to be killing any of your creatures, right? This can be a one-sided board wipe. 6 mana for a one-sided board wipe is really good. I think if you even got 3 or 4 of your opponent's creatures with this, that would be pretty good. If you have a way to tap all your opponent's creatures, that's extra good. And also there's the life gain, right? You gain 2 life for each creature destroyed that way. That can be quite a bit of life gain. So if you're in that life gain strategy, it is an option as well. Just a really unique board wipe. I think it's pretty darn decent, so I thought I'd give it a mention. Coming in at number 5 is a card that I wish I would have bought when I first started playing Commander, riding the Dilu Horse. 2 and a green, sorcery. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains horsemanship. So this is a card that, again, seems very unassuming when you look at it. So for any newer Magic players, I'll just say horsemanship is probably something you're not familiar with. What it is that the creature that has it can't be blocked except by creatures with horsemanship. And of course, not a lot of creatures are going to have horsemanship, right? It is an ability that appeared in Portal 3 Kingdoms. It is very unique. Just like with Shadow, I say this about Shadow all the time, how if you put a Shadow creature in your deck, it's essentially unblockable because your opponents aren't going to have any creatures with Shadow, likely. Horsemanship is the same way. Your opponents are probably not going to have a horsemanship creature, so this makes your creature unblockable, essentially, and in green, that's really, really good. So why did I say I should have bought this card a long, long time ago? Because it was about a $40 card when I first started playing Commander. I actually saw it in Commander Versus. The Commander Versus guys were using it in a game. That's the first time I had ever seen that card. I quickly looked it up because I was considering putting it in a deck. It was like $45, I think. And I decided against it. I was like, $45, that's kind of a lot. It is now $275. And you know, this really is because of Commander. I talked about this with my patrons the other day about how Commander really drives the prices now. And if a card is popular in Commander, it really makes the prices skyrocket. Portal 3 Kingdoms is a notoriously expensive set because it's an old set and they didn't print that many of them. So a lot of those cards are really, really expensive, unfortunately. It would be nice to see them get some reprints. However, I'm sure there's still a lot of people going, well, I don't get it. Why is this card so expensive? Why do you want it? Giving your creature +2/+2 and unblockable until end of turn is not that big of a deal. Well, there is no until end of turn, right? That's what makes this card entirely unique and why it is so expensive and so sought after. This is one of maybe the only cards in existence that is a sorcery that isn't until end of turn. And again, I don't know if this was a printing mistake or in Portal 3 Kingdoms, they sort of had weird wording on cards. This permanently gives a creature +2/+2 and horsemanship. So your riding the Dilu Horse resolves, goes to the graveyard, your creature has +2/+2 and horsemanship for the rest of the game as long as it remains in play, right? That is very unique. And of course, it's really good. Giving a creature you control, maybe your commander, permanently +2/+2 and essentially unblockable, of course, is fantastic. So that's why this card is so sought after, and unfortunately it is really expensive, but I thought I would give it a mention because it is entirely unique. Coming in at number 6, and I got a couple in a row that, again, people might groan a little bit at. Rising Waters, 3 and a blue enchantment. Lands don't untap during their controller's untap steps. And at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps a land they control. So this is a blue version of Winter Orb or Hokori Dustdrinker, essentially the exact same effect. It is lesser known, though, I think. I think a lot of people don't know this exists. You know, a lot of people will play like an Azoria Staxi theme, but if you're in a Staxi theme that is not white, because white typically does that kind of stuff best. If you're in mono blue, a little bit of Staxi, or maybe you're in a Simic Stax deck, this is one that is a little less known. I know people don't love playing against that stuff, but there are people that want to make decks like this. This is a mono blue Winter Orb effect. Next up, we got Ritual of Subdual, and again, another Staxi sort of effect off color. And again, if you're looking for that Simic Stax deck, this is another one you can use. 4 green enchantment, cumulative upkeep 2. So that's not great. However, the effect is pretty darn powerful. If a land is tapped for mana, it produces colorless mana instead of any other type. That's pretty darn good. So there are similar effects like this in other colors. This one really hoses people. I mean, any land that's tapped for mana is going to be producing only colorless mana. that's going to hold people back. A lot of decks just won't be able to cast spells at all while this is in play, so it can really shut stuff down. Maybe you got a lot of mana rocks in your deck or something, right? Because this is only going to be lands, or maybe you have a lot of mana dorks. I would say this would be a great card in a deck that has a lot of mana dorks because it's only going to affect lands. Your mana dorks will still produce green or whatever color mana they are producing, so it can be really great there. And yeah, it has cumulative upkeep too, but like a lot of these effects, there are a lot of effects out there that affect lands, and they almost always have upkeeps because they're, keeping these things around forever is just not fun. It's going to completely shut the game down. So it does limit you, but that's fine. I think playing this and keeping it on the table for 2 or 3 turns can give you such a massive advantage and hurt your opponent so much that that's good enough, right? Or even if you're not getting a huge advantage out of it, maybe you just want to slow the game down. There's always that possibility as well. And again, it's a little off color, right? I always like to mention those sort of off color cards that you don't typically see this kind of thing in green. So there it is if you're looking for that option. Coming in at number 8 is Samit Elder, 2 and a white, human cleric 1/2. Just tap and creatures you control gain protection from the colors of target permanent you control until end of turn. Very interesting sort of Mother of Ruins type of effect here. This is a really interesting card that I think you could put in a lot of different decks, particularly ones with more colors, right? This is not a card you're going to want to put in your mono white deck, I don't think, because it's going to give your creatures protection from only white, obviously, right? Because that's the only color you have in your deck. But man, in a 5-color deck, this is one of those cards, and there's a few that I've done on this series that I just think are just bananas in a 5-color deck. I might do an actual list just for that alone. Just tapping this and aiming it at, say, your commander, which is going to be 5 colors, and giving your entire team protection from all colors seems pretty darn good, right? This is going to give protection from all of the colors of that target permanent you control. So even if you're in that Atraxa deck, you're going to tap this, aiming it at your Atraxa, and now your team gets protection from blue, black, white, and green. That's pretty darn good. That's going to cover a whole lot of removal. Also keeps from blocking, For all those who don't necessarily know how protection work, it's going to keep from any targeting, any auras will fall off, and creatures can't block them if they have that color, and they also can't take damage from it. So if you have that creature and you're blocking your opponent's creature that is that color, your creature's not going to take any damage from it. Protection is a really powerful ability in the game, and being able to give your whole team protection from a whole bunch of colors all at once seems really, really good. Coming in at number 9, we got Sacred Guide. 1 white mana human cleric 1/1. And this is a really interesting card. Pay 1 and a white, sacrifice Sacred Guide, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a white card. Put that card into your hand. Exile all other cards revealed this way. This is very unique. You don't see this in white a lot. This is a card that I cracked open in packs quite a bit back in the day when I was buying all those Tempest booster packs, and I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't think it was very good at all. And a lot of people probably don't think it's very good at all, okay? This is essentially card draw, right? Which you don't see a lot in white. If you think about it this way, if I'm in a mono white deck, this is essentially pay 1 and a white, sacrifice to draw a card. You're going to guaranteed not get a land. So that's kind of better. That's better than drawing a card, because any lands you reveal off the top, or even artifacts like mana rocks, stuff you don't really want, that stuff will get swept to the side until you get an actual white card. So that can be really good. That can be better than just draw a card, because probably later in the game you don't want lands, you don't want mana rocks. Also, because it's a creature and a really cheap creature, it's probably going to be really easy to get out of the graveyard. And I've talked about this quite a bit, how white is actually really good at getting those creatures with low mana values out of the graveyard repeatedly, right? Maybe you're in a Lures deck and you can keep casting this from your graveyard over and over and over again every turn. Maybe you have an Abiding Grace in play. I really like that card a lot. This is a great card with an Abiding Grace. You just sacrifice it, get something off the top, immediately get it back on your end step so you can do it again. So if you're in a recursion theme, it can be great. It is a human and a cleric, 2 very popular tribes, so might fit in those decks as well. I think it's a pretty interesting, unique card. Maybe you can give it a shot in one of your decks. And coming in at number 10 this week is Safe Haven, a land. And I do not mention lands on my 10 cards video very often. In fact, I think I've only done it once before. And this card I have given a mention before. I gave it a mention on my top 30 colorless utility lands video. And when I gave it a mention on that video, and that video is quite old now, that video came out about a year ago, so probably a lot of viewers of my channel have not seen it yet. Go check it out if you want. This is the one land that a lot of people commented on that video that they had never never seen before, and they're like, wow, that's really interesting. So I'm giving it a mention here because I do think it's a really unique, interesting land. Now, it is one of those lands like they used to make back in the day that doesn't tap for mana. So you're in the sort of maze of if scenario where probably don't want to include this as a land in your deck. Maybe you want to include it as a non-land because it's not going to tap for mana. However, you're also in the situation where because it's a land, you can go search for it as a land, right? So you can use a Sylvan Scrying or an expedition map or something like that to go get this out of your deck. So that can be an advantage as well. But what does it do, right? You can pay 2 mana and tap, exile target creature you control. That's it. You just exile a creature you control. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice Safe Haven. If you do, return each card exiled with Safe Haven to the battlefield under its owner's control. Now, I know people will say, well, how about Endless Sands? That does the same thing and it taps for mana, so it's even better. I don't think it is. With Endless Sands, you have to pay for and tap, sacrifice Endless Sands and return each creature card with, that's very mana intensive and you have to tap it. Safe Haven, you don't have to do that. In fact, what you could do is you can exile a creature on your opponent's turn, say for example, and then on your upkeep, at the beginning of your upkeep, this trigger will go on the stack and you can respond to it by exiling another creature and then sacrifice it and you get both the creatures back. Works really good in a blink strategy because it is a land that can exile your creatures and bring them back, right? You can exile a whole bunch of creatures here. You can exile 3, 4, 5 creatures. As long as you're not that worried about your opponents destroying this land, you can just go nuts exiling all your creatures. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, when you decide it's a good time to do it, maybe someone just cast a board wipe. Now you bring them all back. Don't have to pay any mana for it. You just do it all at once. You get all those ETB triggers. That can be fantastic. So if you're in maybe a blink strategy that doesn't have a lot of options, like white and blue are really good with the blinking, also can be really good in a land strategy because you are sacrificing it. So if you have the ability to play lands from your graveyard, you can just use this as a one shot, right? Someone's going to kill my commander. I exile it on my upkeep. I sacrifice this, bring my commander back into play, and then I can play my Safe Haven from my graveyard again, reuse it again. So if you're in a land strategy that can get lands out of the graveyard, you can use this over and over again. And of course, there are lots of decks out there like that. Really interesting card, I think. It can probably go in a lot of decks. Even if you're not in the blink strategy, just 2 mana to save one of my creatures that I can get back right away seems pretty good. So try it out in one of your decks and see how it works for you. But that is it for today. That is 10 more cards you should be putting in your commander decks. And if you are thinking of purchasing any of these cards, I have a TCG Player link. It is in the description. Give it a click. It helps support the channel. But that is it for today. And thanks for tuning in.